Have you ever wondered about the power of a single document, how it can shape the destiny of millions? Welcome to an exploration of such a document, the notorious Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. This seemingly innocuous piece of paper held in its words the unique relationship between India and the picturesque state of Jammu and Kashmir. In the mid-20th century, the dawning of a newly independent India saw the introduction of this article. It was born out of a tumultuous period of history, a time when borders were being drawn and redrawn, people were finding new identities, and nations were establishing themselves on the global stage. This article, in essence, granted Jammu and Kashmir a special status, a degree of autonomy that set it apart from the rest of India. But what happens when such an integral part of a nation's legal framework is questioned? Now, imagine the shockwaves when the Supreme Court delivered its judgment on this pivotal document. The path to the Supreme Court was not a straight one. It was filled with twists and turns, political maneuvers, and heated debates. In the heart of India's political landscape, a monumental decision was made. The government, in a surprising move, decided to repeal Article 370 of the Constitution. This particular article had granted special autonomy to the region of Jammu and Kashmir, allowing it to have its own constitution, flag, and control over internal administrative matters. The repeal was a seismic shift, altering the very fabric of the nation's constitutional setup. The decision was not taken lightly. It sparked a flurry of reactions, both within and outside the country. Supporters of the repeal hailed it as a necessary step towards integrating the region more closely with the rest of India. They argued that the special status had hindered its development and fostered separatism. On the flip side, critics vehemently opposed the move. They viewed it as an assault on the region's unique identity and democratic rights. They argued that the decision was made unilaterally without consulting the very people it would affect the most. As the country found itself divided, the issue inevitably found its way to the legal arena. A series of legal challenges were brought forth, questioning the constitutional validity of the government's decision. The petitioners argued that the government had overstepped its bounds and violated the spirit of the Constitution. In the midst of this legal turmoil, the Supreme Court was tasked with a monumental responsibility. They had to review the decision, its constitutional implications, and its adherence to the principles of democracy and federalism. The court had to tread a careful line. It was not just about interpreting the Constitution, but also about upholding the values that the Constitution enshrined. This was the backdrop against which the Supreme Court was set to deliver its judgment. The stakes were high. The decision would not just affect the region of Jammu and Kashmir, but potentially set a precedent for the entire nation. All eyes were on the Supreme Court as it prepared to deliver its judgment. The Supreme Court, the guardian of the Constitution, was now tasked with determining the fate of Article 370. This marked the beginning of a critical chapter in India's legal and political history. The court's deliberation was a complex process, involving multiple layers of legal, historical, and ethical considerations. Central to the discourse was the question of constitutional validity. The opponents argued that the government's move to abrogate Article 370 was unconstitutional. They pointed out that the Constitution explicitly required the consent of the state's constituent assembly, which, in the case of Jammu and Kashmir, was dissolved years ago. On the other hand, the government defended its action, asserting that the president had the power to declare that Article 370 would cease to be operative. They maintained that this was in adherence to the Constitution, not in violation of it. This contentious issue was the bedrock of the court's deliberation. Next, the court had to grapple with the historical agreements that lay at the heart of Article 370, the Instrument of Accession, signed by the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 and the Delhi Agreement of 1952. Both played a significant role in shaping the unique constitutional relationship between Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India. The court had to consider these historical agreements and their implications carefully. Lastly, the court had to factor in the human rights considerations. Critics of the government's decision pointed to the restrictions on communication, movement, and assembly imposed in the region following the revocation of Article 370. They contended that these measures violated the fundamental rights of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Each of these considerations, the constitutional validity, the historical agreements, and the human rights concerns, formed the crux of the Supreme Court's deliberation. The judges had to weigh each argument, sift through a mountain of legal precedents, and balance the rule of law with the realities on the ground. The nation held its breath, waiting for the verdict. This was a moment that would shape the course of India's future, and the Supreme Court stood at the helm. The day of the judgment arrived. The decision of the Supreme Court was about to be revealed. A hush fell over the room as the gavel descended, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the story of Article 370 and Jammu and Kashmir. The Supreme Court, with its collective wisdom and responsibility, had reached a verdict. The decision was not just a statement of law, but a testament to the principles of justice, democracy, and the rule of law that our Constitution embodies. The judgment was complex, layered with nuanced legal reasoning and interpretations of the Constitution. It was clear that the court had painstakingly delved into every aspect of Article 370, considering its historical context, its implications, and the constitutional validity of its abrogation. The court held that the abrogation of Article 370 was constitutionally valid. It stated that the President of India had the power to modify the Constitution under Article 370, provided it was done with the concurrence of the government of the state. The court further clarified that the term government of the state could be interpreted to mean the governor acting on the advice of the state cabinet. This judgment was not just an end, but also a beginning. It opened up a Pandora's box of questions, debates, and discussions. What would be the immediate implications of this decision? How would it affect the people of Jammu and Kashmir? Would it lead to greater integration of the state with the rest of the country, or would it deepen the existing divides? As the judgment resonated across the nation, it was clear that its implications were far-reaching. It had the potential to redefine the relationship between Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India, setting a precedent for constitutional changes in the future. The judgment was out, but what did it really mean for the future of Jammu and Kashmir? Only time would tell. As we stood at this critical juncture, the importance of dialogue, empathy, and understanding in navigating the road ahead could not be overstated. The Supreme Court's judgment sent ripples across the nation and beyond. From the corridors of power in Delhi to the streets of Srinagar, the judgment stirred a potpourri of reactions. Political leaders, legal experts, and the citizens of Jammu and Kashmir all had their own perspectives to share. Let's delve into these varied reactions. In the political arena, the decision was seen as a hot potato. Some leaders lauded the judgment, viewing it as a stride towards unity and integration. They believed that it opened avenues for development and progress in Jammu and Kashmir. Others, however, saw it as an infringement on the state's autonomy, sparking intense debate and discussions. The legal fraternity, too, had its share of opinions. Legal experts across the country dissected the judgment, examining its constitutional validity and implications. Some hailed it as a landmark decision, setting a precedent for future cases. Others, however, pointed out potential loopholes and raised questions about its implementation. But perhaps the most poignant reactions came from the citizens of Jammu and Kashmir themselves. For some, The judgment brought a sense of hope and optimism. They looked forward to the promise of increased opportunities and a better future. Yet others felt a sense of loss, mourning the change in their state's unique status. The judgment's impact on the ground was equally varied. It catalyzed a series of changes in Jammu and Kashmir, from administrative shifts to socio-economic transformations. The effects were felt far and wide, with the ripples reaching even the most remote corners of the state. And yet, amidst all these reactions and impacts, the judgment served as a reminder of the dynamic nature of democracy. It underscored the importance of dialogue and debate in shaping the nation's future. It highlighted the role of the judiciary in upholding the Constitution and safeguarding the rights of the citizens. The Supreme Court's judgment on Article 370 marked a turning point in India's history. The judgment on Article 370 was not just a legal decision, it was a decision that shaped the destiny of millions. As we conclude, let's take a moment to reflect on the long-term implications of this judgment. The verdict has redefined the contours of Indian federalism, highlighting the tremendous power vested in the Constitution. It emphasizes the fluidity of constitutional provisions and their potential to alter the political landscape. Let's ponder about Jammu and Kashmir. The region, once bestowed with a special status, now stands at the threshold of a new era. The judgment has triggered a paradigm shift, opening avenues for increased national integration while also raising questions about regional autonomy. The impact of this verdict is still unfolding, like a story being written in real time. The ripples it has created will continue to affect the socio-political fabric of India for times to come. As we continue to grapple with the ramifications of this judgment, one thing is clear: the power of a single document, a single article in the Constitution, can indeed shape the destiny of millions.